This is New Rural Virginia, reclaiming rural leadership through conversation featuring real voices, real issues from the heart of the Commonwealth. Hey y'all, welcome back to New Rural Virginia podcast. What a day. I'm Parson Brown.
And I'm Larry Wohlers, and we are your very tired but excited podcast hosts.
Yes.
Right, we are recording as of 9 p.m. on referendum day, and CNN and others have just called the referendum, but boy, was it a nail-biter. As we are speaking now, we now know that the referendum did pass, but not by much, right? And not in our counties, right?
We had some great people working really hard, but it was never a shoo-in down
Right.
to the last minute. I was watching all the coverage. That's why we're so late finishing up this episode.
That's right. But it was a crazy, chaotic day. You were up really early in the morning.
Yeah, I was up in the dark. It was so cold this morning that my folding table to pop up at the polls was frozen shut. So that's how I started my day, but happy to do it. That's what we do.
But in the middle of all this, we had the great privilege to be able to sit down with our Lieutenant Governor.
Yes, amidst the chaos.
We're able to have with her. We did mention the referendum, but it was really a very thoughtful conversation about her ideas on the future of the Commonwealth, of the programs we need to put in place for Virginians, and her projects, Virginia Voices, another called Literature and Government, ideas for bringing all of Virginians together.
Which is what we need to do now and really focusing on moving forward. So I'm really excited to share this conversation. We got the LG in the house today.
Madam Lieutenant Governor, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Larry. Thank you, Parson. Great to join you both.
Yes, it's great to have you, and not least because we actually have something in common. We are both the children of professors of political science.
Oh, that's an interesting fact.
That's
I did
right.
not know that.
That doesn't happen very often. In my case, that led me to stay clear of actually engaging in politics. I just like to dabble on the side. Wasn't true for you. But you're just short of 100 days since the inauguration. Not a long time at all, but boy, what a busy period, huh? General Assembly session, which was packed with activity, and now a referendum.
Yes, absolutely. It's been a busy 100 days. And, Virginians elected Abigail Spanberger, myself, and Jay Jones, as well as 13 new House members, where we flipped some seats, and they expected some outcomes. They expected this hard work, and I think we are delivering on what Virginia has sent us here to do.
So speaking of the referendum, we were talking a little bit before the recording. You were at the polls. I literally just came from the polls myself. The vote is going on as we speak, and the fight for redistricting is happening right now. And so in the midst of all that, thank you very much for taking the time to come and join us. But what we really want to know a little bit about is you've launched a new initiative, Literature and Government, a lecture series. And I really am so intrigued and fascinated by that. And I'd love to have you tell us more about it.
Well, yes, this is so exciting for me, and it's an opportunity for me to continue to connect with Virginians over these next 4 years. That was the one aspect of campaigning that I absolutely loved. I put on over 80,000 miles on my little Prius, and
Wow.
I just crossed 100,000 miles this morning. So it really helped me to understand the wide range of folks that we have all across the Commonwealth. And one thing that I kept kind of thinking about is the way in which we need to connect with Virginians through our stories, through the stories that have shaped who and what we are as Americans. The narratives that underscore our critical democracy and our identity. And my background is in literature. I taught American literature specifically for 30 years. And so thinking, as I often do, I often think about my own life experiences and the work that I'm doing through the lens of literary writing. And when I'm in the Senate chamber, a lot of times it's literary references that are coming to my mind. And so this is a way for me to speak to Virginians through that lens, to make state government more accessible and to engage in conversations and really hear what's top of mind. So we did our first lecture series last week at William and Mary, and
Right. Yeah.
really engaged undergraduates. And my focus at that first lecture was on the Federalist Papers, very timely for us with the 250th anniversary, and also thinking about what James Madison or Hamilton or Jefferson might be saying about our current state government. So we had a really lively conversation last week at William and Mary.
I think that's great. You are a lifelong educator. My mother is a now retired elementary and middle school teacher. She was a reading specialist, so from a very young age, literacy and just having access to literature has been instilled with me from the beginning. Clearly, you're passionate about education, K through 12 education. Virginia ranks middle of the pack overall spending per student, but that's only because we rely per locality. That is a burden that rural communities feel more than some of our neighbors in Northern Virginia. Is that a problem we can fix, and can we address that in our young people?
Absolutely. I was chair of our Senate Committee on Education and Health. And as chair, these are the issues that I was very closely working on for the last 6 years in the Senate. A few years ago, we had a report issued by our Joint Legislative Audit Review Committee, where the research showed that the state government had actually been underfunding public education by over $6 billion. That's billion with a B.
Right.
And that was a very stark indication of the reason why we have these great disparities across Virginia's public education system. Parson, you said it best, some of our localities are able to pick up those public ed costs and are able to provide superb, excellent education to their students. But a child's educational opportunities in Virginia shouldn't depend on their zip code. And so when we are underfunding our public education, it means that the local government has to pick up those pieces. And some of our local governments are able to fund at the necessary levels, while other communities are struggling. And we see huge disparities all across Virginia as a result. So with that report in mind, 2 years ago, I had introduced budget and legislation to bring funding back to the level where it needs to be. And we got across over $2.5 billion that last biennium directed towards public education. Last year, I also put in additional funding as chair, and we were close to another $1 billion. So we still have a ways to go, but the good news is we've begun to tackle the problem. Now, one way that we are able to approach the funding in a better model is to do what so many other states have already done, and that is to modernize our funding formula to ensure that our costs, our funds are being directed to those students and those communities in greatest need. So when our schools are serving large populations of low-income students, they receive more money. When they're serving large populations of special needs students, they receive more money. So student-directed funding is a better model rather than the system under which we've been working for the last 50 years. It's outdated. We need to modernize our funding formula, and that will be able to decrease those tremendous disparities that we see across Virginia.
Yeah, that would be great. I know in Rappahannock County, where I live, the school board is literally wondering how are they going to pay for the rising healthcare costs. The money just isn't there. But switching over to higher education for a second, because you were a professor in a community college, and Virginia's done much better by rural areas in terms of community colleges in recent years, really spent more and more effectively. But four-year colleges is a little bit of a different story. Our four-year schools have a great reputation. But if you look at the cost of going to four-year schools, it makes it really hard for people with lower income. And a lot of people in rural counties don't have the same income that people do in Northern Virginia or Richmond. And as a result, I think a lot of people in rural communities here just don't see four-year colleges as an option for them.
Yeah, and they shouldn't see four-year colleges as the only option because there's so many options in
Right.
Virginia. We need to continue to expand the good work that we have already been focused on. So certainly highlighting apprenticeship opportunities. Last week I was in Hampton and Newport News as part of my tour, and we got to tour the wonderful apprenticeship school, which also provides a 2-year degree to its graduates. But it's to deliver those skills that are so critical for our shipbuilding industry. Virginia has so many different and remarkable industries that are pathways for many students to be able to get the skills, the training, and to earn high income. I talked to one young man, he's all of 20 years old. He's part of that apprenticeship program. And he shared that he's getting ready to buy his house, his first house at age 20. These kinds of apprenticeship programs, not only are they giving our students skills, but they're also paying students as they learn. So one thing we want to make sure is that Virginians and parents especially understand the breadth of opportunities that their young people have, whether it's going into career and technical training programs, going into different apprenticeship opportunities, finding out different sectors in technology, for instance, that don't require four-year degrees, but that lead to exciting and creative, innovative new career pathways.
Right.
Those are all wonderful. And community colleges, I'm so passionate about community colleges, and they really are the hidden gem of Virginia. When we talk about affordability of education, getting your first 2 years in a community college is a great option. And we are also working to make sure that students have dual enrollment opportunities so they can actually complete a good chunk of their first 2 years of college while they are in high school. These are the kinds of programs we need to continue to focus on and deliver effectively in Virginia.
Yeah, I know I have so many friends that have been, community college has been a catapult for them to continue their academic career and their professional careers. And people underestimate community colleges sometimes. Rural communities in general, we're suffering from budget cuts and policy choices that the presidential administration in Washington has made. As Larry mentioned, healthcare and slashing of agricultural services. But we know this is also putting pressure on our state budget, and there's a void, some holes to fill. What I'm wondering is, what can your new initiative do to help overall empower people to succeed? We talk about affordability, but we also talk about prosperity. How do we sustain ourselves in rural Virginia?
Yeah. Rural communities are near and dear to my heart. I grew up in Southeast Georgia, a very rural area, and these are the kind of communities I just am passionate about supporting and making sure that we do make so many options for Virginians to live and to thrive in these areas. They're very precious to us, absolutely. So in the state Senate, I deliberately chose options that would allow me to focus on the issues that impact our rural communities. I asked to serve on the Agriculture, Conservation, and Natural Resources Committee in the Senate, so I could focus on issues such as the concerns focusing our farming communities, focusing on environmental regulations to protect our natural resources. And I also joined the Broadband Advisory Council. So for 6 years, focused on how do we deliver connectivity to rural areas. that is an essential cornerstone if we're talking about bringing economic development, new industries that can help our rural areas to thrive and give opportunities for people to find new career pathways. Those are just the essential steps that we need to take. And so fighting for these concerns has been top of mind for me. Yeah, I also served as vice chair of the Joint Commission on Healthcare, and our focus in the JCHC was on the disparities that we see in healthcare access. So if we want to improve the life and the conditions of rural communities, making sure that we have healthcare services that are accessible and that are available to all of our friends and neighbors here, that has got to be a top of mind concern as well. So focusing on healthcare, technology, education, all of that are the necessary steps to responding to the urgency that we see in rural areas in Virginia.
A part of your initiative, as you've announced, is also civic engagement. So will there be opportunities for, as you do this lecture series, to get folks involved, to get like people from universities on the ground engaged and give them avenues to pursue how to make positive changes?
Yes, it's not just literature and government, but the second initiative that's working side by side with it is something we're calling Virginia's Voices. And this is the chance to connect with all of the voices in Virginia, especially those voices that I heard on the campaign trail. They said, we're not being heard in Richmond. No one sees us. No one understands what we are facing. And I want to make sure that we are truly listening to the diverse voices that we have here. And, that means talking to our small business owners in these areas, talking to parents and others to hear what they're thinking about for their children, talking to our local and state elected officials so that we get insights of their unique challenges in their localities. We did that as part of the tour in Williamsburg area. We met with folks in Hampton and Newport News. We visited the Peninsula Food Bank and understood the crisis of food insecurity that's facing so many of our neighbors. And so these are all ways to connect the issues that I heard about on the campaign trail and that I want to translate into policy measures over these next 4 years to really respond to the urgent situation that families are facing.
Are these very much listening tours, or
Yes.
Is there an idea that in a year or 2 or 3 there would be some more of an organization there that you can draw upon?
Exactly. Yes. By engaging in these listening tours and then taking the direct feedback, we are building an infrastructure for response. And so one thing that we've heard, for instance, when we were in Hampton, we had, and talking to our small business owners, they pointed to very specific issues that are creating barriers for their ability to keep up with the rising cost. And they said, there's policy measures in Maryland or in Tennessee that are better than what we're doing in Virginia. It's those kinds of specific details that help me understand the challenges that our folks are facing, and then to be able to bring in some policy responses. So it's not just listening, but it is taking the insights that I'm gaining directly and then translating them into opportunities to fight for these different communities. So it's very exciting to do that. And similarly, with the food bank, we heard about the impacts that the disastrous Trump policies have made in cutting resources and funding for so many families in need. And the state is going to have to find ways to respond. And this is a chance then to see what we can do at the state level whether it's building partnership across other nonprofit organizations, or partnerships with our local farmers, and ensuring that we have solid and concrete measures to tackle the issues that we see.
Small business is going to be especially important when you're going around rural counties, because small business really is the backbone of employment, and also the economy. Because if you lose that independent grocer or that independent pharmacy, there's no big chain that's necessarily going to be there to replace that. So I think rural businesses would be really interested in these conversations. That said, I think you'll also, I'm sure you know this, a lot of rural businesses don't really think of the Democratic Party as being their home. How do we change that?
I'm committed to fighting for every Virginian. And for me, so many of these issues are not partisan at all. Unfortunately, they get cast in partisan lens, but
Absolutely.
for me, it's not an issue of Democrat or Republican. It really is what's best for Virginia. And being pragmatic about the concerns that we see and finding real solutions is what I'm looking for. And for me, I think having been in the classroom for 30 years, we didn't divide ourselves into R's and D's. There was no division across aisles in our conversations. We
Right.
studied the issues, we studied the history and the text, and then came to an understanding of what these serious concerns are. So it's as I'm talking to people, I am always focused on listening directly to the challenges and the anxieties that they may have, as well as the hopes that they want to share. And that is a chance then to see what is directly in front of us, and then find common solutions that are going to be effective and make changes. So politics is always there, but that's not the path that I am usually on as I'm listening and engaging with people.
Right. We talk a lot about on here and also in Warren County about being good neighbors, not so much being one party or the other, especially when it comes to more local politics, which is a great segue, actually. I don't think that we could talk about literature and government in the Commonwealth of Virginia without bringing up where I'm from in Warren County, the Samuel's Public Library that was embattled for several years. For those that don't know, and I know, Lieutenant Governor, that you're aware of it because you came and visited us in Warren County. We're very appreciative of that. Began as a content issue. They wanted to remove mostly LGBTQ plus books from the library. And of course, that was thwarted, but it became an issue where the Board of Supervisors was able to restrict funding to our public library, which was the 2024 Virginia Library of the Year, Samuel's Public Library. And this kind of became an epicenter, but this is something that other communities are facing. And with your new initiative, I wonder if there's anything on the state level that we could do to offer more protections to public libraries.
Yes, I would love to see increased funding from the state level for our public libraries. Public libraries were my haven as a child. I know so many children and families just really, really rely on this wonderful resource. When I was, I grew up in a very small town. There wasn't a lot to do. So in the summertime, my dad would drop me and my brother off at the library. We'd spend all day and just roam the stacks and have free reign.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. So for so many children and adults as well, they are an incredible resource. The fact that, libraries were founded in this country almost from the very beginning, because we knew that literacy is incredibly important to democracy.
Vital.
We also knew that having access to books ought to be available not to just the elite class, but to everybody. So it has been very disheartening to see the kinds of attacks that we've seen on libraries, the censorship approach that many different localities, as well as even some other state governments, have tried to engage in. And that's something we all need to collectively fight against. I've been at the forefront of this. Under the Youngkin administration, we saw some really disastrous bills that would have harmed
Yeah.
public
Mhm.
libraries, school libraries.
Yeah.
We were able to stop that legislation, and I'm committed to supporting and expanding the resources that public libraries provide. They're vital to so many people who don't have access to computers within their house, don't have access to
Yeah.
many different materials. And this is something that every community ought to fight and champion, is the protection of our public libraries.
In Warren County, because of the hostility that we've faced over the last few years, that is so refreshing to hear. It's been really tough on our community. So thank you very, very much.
Of course, yeah.
Yes. There is, I think here in rural areas, as you look at the referendum, it has created some anxiety in rural areas. And I think in a sense that they're facing a kind of hostile takeover by urban areas, right? Certainly we in the 11th have about 100,000 rural residents in a much larger district. How do we get past that? How do we, build a sense that really we do have a lot more in common than that which divides us?
The one message I've been sharing with Virginians as I'm talking to them is this is not about redistricting. It's in fact about healthcare. It's not about redistricting. It's about access to education. It's not about redistricting. It's about our infrastructure, our economy, making sure that people have the capacity to get jobs and to pay their electric bills and to put a roof over their head. This is about everything that's at stake right now. So one thing we have seen, of course, is the disaster that is Donald Trump and his administration.
Right.
And the people that have been harmed the most and the first have been our rural communities. And we don't have champions in Washington that are actually standing up and speaking on behalf of rural Virginians. When the cuts and the slashes to Medicaid funding were put into H.R. 1, we didn't see our current representatives in these rural areas saying no to Donald Trump and standing up and fighting for Virginians as they should
That's
have.
right.
As a result of that, we've seen our clinics close in the rural areas. We didn't see them stand up and fight for our farmers. We've got farmers with soybean product that's sitting in warehouses with nowhere to go because China has already shifted where it's going to be purchasing its soybeans to South America. We need people who are going to fight for Virginians. It doesn't matter if they're Democrats or if they're Republicans. Every single Virginian ought to have a representative that is responding to their needs, to their urgency, and standing up to Donald Trump. This is an opportunity for voters to say they want real representation in Congress, not some people who are just going to put rubber stamps on everything that this disastrous presidency continues to do.
Yeah, that's what we call a good neighbor out here in rural Virginia.
I like that. I am just really excited about the opportunity to continue to fight on behalf of the wonderful communities that I met as I traveled. And I heard so many stories that continue to inspire me. I think often about the young people that I met, the dreams that they have. When I am asked what inspires me to do this work, I always say it's the young people that I've gotten to know. This generation in particular is passionate, and it's also compassionate. I heard how much they care about their neighborhoods. They care about each other. and they really care about building a future that is prosperous and meaningful for everybody. And that's what keeps me going as well.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant
That's really important.
Governor.
Yes.
Really, thank you so for your time. And I'm going to make a point to come to one of your lectures as soon as I can. I'm looking forward to it. Very inspired, and this seems very promising. Thank you for your efforts.
Well, thank
Yes.
you. We'll be at a college near you in the next few years.
Thank you so much.
You have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
New Rural Virginia Podcast, Conversations about Rural Virginia's Future, is a product of New Rural Virginia. Visit newruralva.org for more. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow us. We're available anywhere you get your audio. For deeper dives into the topics we cover, catch additional insights and stories on the Rural Angle Substack newsletter. This program is produced by Larry Wohlers and yours truly, Parson Brown. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode.